Welcome.
Right.
My name is Jim Taylor, and
like
I work for USF and through the SBDC. I'm housed in USF Connect, where the Tampa Bay Technology Incubator is. We have 50 startup companies and 20 student companies, mostly in the field of technology. And I'm excited here today to have a great panel to discuss some things with. I'm going to introduce them because they're very humble, the ones I know, and they won't talk about their accomplishments. So I'm going to detail a little bit of those. First here on my left is Mr. Girish Wable of Jabil Semiconductor. Jabil is an $18 billion company in the Tampa Bay region. Girish has almost 20 years of experience in technology operations, sourcing, and solutions for the company. And he has experience in electronics manufacturing, high-performance coding, and going to talk a little bit about 3D printing today as well. Next to him is Dr. Yogi Goswami. He's a distinguished professor at the University of South Florida. He's a director of the Clean Energy Research Center. He's the editor of 2 national solar energy journals. He's written 19 books, 350 articles. He holds 16 patents, some of those of which have been commercialized. And right now, he's working on moving the Earth closer to the sun to improve solar efficiencies.
That's a good plan.
Next to him is Mr. Kotscher. He's the CEO of MetroTech Net, a transportation-related firm out of Atlanta. He traveled a little bit of a ways to get here today. His background is across different sectors, and he's got some great things to say about the future of transportation, smart cars, self-driving cars everybody wants to talk about today, so I'm sure he'll touch on that for us. Thank you. And on the end, many of you know Joy. She won't talk about her accomplishments. I'll try, but we would take the whole 45 minutes on Joy. So, Joy is kind of a force of nature around here. I've had the pleasure of meeting her at the Startup Grind events. Joy has started 13 companies and sold 8, an incredible batting average for an entrepreneur. She has raised more than $350 million in investment capital. She's involved in over 39 ventures right now. She has 3 companies that she's running in startup due diligence, IT infrastructure, and cybersecurity. And she's also a mentor at MIT, Galvanize and Women's Startup Lab, and also a strong mentor and supporter of women in business, which I admire very much. Joy is also partially a vampire and doesn't need sleep like most humans. So thank you, Joy.
Thank you.
You didn't know you were all getting roasted today, right? So I'm going to start with Mr. Kotscher, who came down. And many view the transportation industry as kind of a dowdy, government-related utility, slow to innovate. And a lot of times they're not forward-looking as far as funding and RFPs. Can you tell me a little bit about what MetroTech is doing in the sector and how the funding is happening in that area?
Well, you pretty much nailed it. I think it was FDOT just this year celebrated 100 years. So you can imagine from dirt roads to paving to superstructures and bridges to a port like this, a lot of stuff gets done, mostly through RFP, right? Because you want the cheapest rate for that bridge, for that piece of commoditized structure. There's not a lot of room for innovation. And as I'm still not even sure the origins of this statement. I don't know if it was us or if I heard it at a conference, but we like to say in my company that RFPs are not the source of innovation, right? You've never seen anything innovated through an RFP because it's just anti-innovation. It's let me buy the same thing over and over again, commoditized. So we're looking at not only technology, which we've had working in Silicon Valley for 3 years. That's not the hard part, right? What we're looking at is how to innovate the actual industry. So we're working with FDOT, we're working with some of your local congressmen, we're working with GDOT, we're working with Caltrans. We've got, for a small company, a pretty good footprint, but we're working on getting that funding and that innovation outside of an RFP process so that true innovation can happen. So otherwise, it doesn't. It's the same old thing. We have an example in Atlanta project that they did the specs for a certain camera type with some analytics on it, and 4 years later, when they were doing the 3rd stage, they went back to the thing and pulled the same camera out. Well, they were paying for 4-year-old technology at the 4-year-old price, but that was part of the specs, and they just kept kind of going along it. So, you know, we're a technology company, but we're really an advocate for changing the way that governments do business and trying to find ways. And there's some legislation in the transportation bill. There's going to be some language coming out of the federal one talking about this. Senator Brandis here locally is also working on some of those things. So we do see a change. And frankly, we see a lot of good stuff coming out of Tampa. We're here for two reasons. One sitting is next to me, and the other one is you know, what Senator Brandis and your political leaders here have been talking about as far as the automated vehicle in Tampa being a test bed for that. Great support, great start, but now we need to make it happen. And it's got to come through other means than just, you know, we throw an RFP out, and in 12 months we'll decide who we're going to pick, and then we'll try to. Silicon Valley will be long past and long deployed before we get around to that process.
Great. I'm going to direct a question to Joy, if you don't mind. You have a lot of experience in the global cybersecurity market. And, you know, Tampa Bay is seeing some new programs at universities, and I've actually visited St. Leo's, and every student has a job coming out of that program. You know, we have SOCOM here. Can we become a leader in cybersecurity here in Tampa?
I think we could. I think it's actually one of the sectors where we have a lot of talent. In addition to the St. Leo program, which I think is a great program, by the way, we also have one at USF, University of Tampa, just announced their new cybersecurity program. But you also, outside of just the university, so the university sector is part of it, ISC Squared, which is a certifying body that certifies, you know, cybersecurity professionals, the #1 in the world is based here. We also have actually the highest number, which most people don't know, of retired CIA and FBI in the world between South Tampa and Venice, Florida, which is pretty crazy. We also have the highest density of instructors for SANS, which is the second largest certifying body of cybersecurity professionals based here locally. You also see some great firms. I mean, there's firms that have done a lot in cybersecurity, both the ones that you see and some of the ones that you don't see. My company works primarily with Fortune 500, Global 2000 in the cybersecurity space, but you've also got some great companies. I mean, I can't say enough awesome things about Kurt Long and, you know, what he's done at Fair Warning, and before that with Open Networks. I mean, this is Kurt's third company, all focused in the security and identity and access management control space. So I think if we began to look at how we start to bridge the gap between what's going on at the university level and how we support startups in that space, we definitely have the potential to be a leader because we actually already have the talent.
That's great, thank you. You know, and I'm glad you brought that up. I bought a new house, and I've always wondered about my neighbor. I think he's a former CEO.
Wait, you can call me. We can maybe help you out with that.
I'm good. Dr. Goswami, solar technology has been around for a long time. As editor-in-chief of Solar Energy Journal and being a top person in the field, where do you see innovation coming in that sector in solar energy?
Well, that's a very simple but very loaded question because it refers to an entire industry, right? Especially since the projections that we have right now, by 2050, 50% of the energy in the whole world is expected to come from solar energy. And that's huge considering that today it's about 1%. I've been in this field for a long time. Back in the 70s, the cost of solar panels was about $100 a watt. And then in the 80s, it was about $30 a watt. And somebody gave a presentation and said, one day, I foresee that these panels will come down to $1 a watt, and everybody in the audience laughed at him because they thought he was crazy. Today, the price is 50 cents a watt. And so that's where the biggest innovation has come in the past decade. Really, literally in about 10 years, it came down from $5 a watt to 50 cents a watt. Okay? Most of it is in manufacturing, how we manufacture these panels and what new technologies we have used in manufacturing, how we have reduced the amount of material needed for these panels. But at the same time, it's all mass manufacturing. one factory that I visited in China that was producing panels, from one end to the line to the next was 1 kilometer. And so, but then this price is not the only thing, that there's the balance of the system in solar energy also, not just the panels. And the biggest problem with solar energy, for it to fulfill that projection of 50% by 2050, is not even the panels, it's the storage of energy. That solar energy is available during daytime, but not at nighttime. Even during daytime, on a day like today, there's not much available. So energy storage becomes the biggest area for innovation. So we need to not only develop storage, but we also need to reduce the cost of storage. Okay? That's an area that I have been involved for a long time. Back in 1990, I gave a testimony to the Energy and Waters Appropriations Committee in the US Congress. And that time I said that you are going to regret not putting money in R&D in energy storage. And just this morning, I got a copy of an article from energy economists from London, and they started the article with my statement that you will regret that, and it's coming out to be true. But at the same time, it presents an opportunity. While in the case of panels, I don't think small entrepreneurs will be able to compete with China at this time. But in innovations in energy storage, there's still a lot of opportunity to do so. Now, in addition, there are other things that are coming in the future. New ways of converting energy, like with nano antennas. That's something we are working on. Then applications of solar energy in other applications like environmental cleanup, photocatalytic oxidation, and so on. So there are a lot of opportunities here.
Okay, thank you. Girish, let's talk a little bit about Jabil. Can we clear that up?
I'm not the right guy to clear
Okay,
up.
I went to 3 websites. How do you pronounce Jabil? Yeah. But it's an $18 billion company. It has a major impact, and in our discussions, it has grown from $4 billion to $18 billion just since you've been with the company. Can you tell me a little bit about the customers that you have across the industry sectors, and which sectors you are focusing on for innovation in the future, in particular?
Right. So I think the way we look at innovation is a little different, right? So I think before we go on there, right, first and foremost, I just want to thank Vinny for inviting me and letting me speak in jeans and a shirt. I've been speaking for about 10 years. Nobody said it was okay to talk in jeans. No commitment to the rest of the panel, right? But that's just an awesome start for this kind of an event in this Tampa area. So thanks for that. So when we talk about innovation for Jabil, right? Whether it's patient monitoring systems that we manufactured, or we manufacture laundry detergent packaging, whether it is smartphone parts that we manufacture, or we manufacture parts for aerospace and aircrafts, right? Whether it is battery storage that we manufacture, or photovoltaics that we manufacture, or sensors for a vehicle, or servers that deal with cybersecurity, right? So all this hardware that we manufacture, I think innovation goes across all these different sectors and all these different markets. The way I'll answer that question is there are many levels in which Jabil innovates. I'll just give you a flavor of 3 different levels on how we innovate, right? So one is we innovate at the grassroots level. So we have hundreds and thousands of workers that actually build the products that all of us use. And we started a competition about 5 years ago where we said we will create 100,000 innovators. And it's called as a best practice competition where all the people that work in the factories all over the world are able to submit ideas, and the best ideas make it to the level where all these people are flown from all over the world into the Tampa Bay area, and they get to present all these innovations that they bring about, right? The second level of innovation happens in our business model. So I think one of the gentlemen here who has worked with Jabil before said, oh, I love your concept of a factory in factory, right? So the way this works is each individual business that services a customer is an independent business unit within Jabil from an operational perspective. Okay, and within that structure, they are empowered to take decisions that are the correct decisions for their customers. And because they are allowed to make these decisions at an operational level for their specific customers, these folks are able to innovate. And then the third level that we innovate is more at our level, where we are looking at strategic capabilities. And we look at different strategic capabilities, and whether it's additive manufacturing, whether it's printed electronics, whether it is sensors, whether it is user experience design, and so on and so forth, right? We look at all these strategic capabilities, and we look at all the different types of innovations that can happen in these sectors, in these strategic capabilities. But how can these innovations go across all the different product categories and customers I talked about? So I think by having a good combination of innovation in the trench, innovation at the operational level, and innovation at the strategic level, Jabil is able to meet the customer demand, and I think that's probably the success of getting from 4 million to 18 million.
Great.
Yep.
And you know, what I find interesting in that is that it's innovation related to a customer or a client. It's not innovation for innovation's sake, where we see a lot of technology, particularly at the university. We've got this cool thing, but nobody wants to buy it. So I think the interesting thing as well is keeping those innovators from leaving Jabil and starting their own companies. You're breeding entrepreneurs within
the organization, right?
Very great.
And don't get me wrong, on the part with universities, we are working with universities to bring those ideas to fruition. Mm-hmm. We are just taking our expertise in manufacturing to the universities, so we can help them scale them a little quicker.
Right. Well, let's get to the topic of the day here, Christian. Let's talk about the self-driving car, and will it be one day we wake up and they're there? Will it be phased in over years? And who will be the early adopters? And when will it reach the mass market, in your opinion?
I like to say geriatrics and alcoholic millionaires will be the first early adopters, because, you know.
Is that in your business plan, I think?
Well, we're just going to provide them the data. That's our part of it. But, you know, we have a meeting actually today. Mercedes is working with Contra Costa County at a naval air station that's putting Momentum. It's going to be the world's first test bed for automated vehicles. MetroTech today is actually bringing BMW into that. Hopefully they're going to be the second one. And we're part of that. So it's happening. They're here, right? The issues are going to be adoption, liability. I mean, thank goodness for Google. I don't have often a lot of good things to say about Google. I think they're an impressive company that, you know, like GE, they can do their own thing. But in this area, if you ever seen the speech that Sebastian, the inventor of the first Google car, you know, he talks about when he was 17, he lost his best friend in a car accident. I have a similar story of what caused me, when I was at IBM in Homeland Security, to ask my leadership if I could form an intelligent transportation practice. I had 3 friends of our family die within 6 weeks in 3 different accidents. And, you know, the technology is there, right? What's missing is the policy and the business model. And so that's why we always say the technology is never the gating factor. It's always the business model and the policy. So, you know, Joy, we were talking before here, you know, who's going to fight the self-driving car? Well, the motels on the side of the road, right? I mean, how much of their business is going to be eliminated? The insurance companies are going to fight it. So, you know, we've been talking about this for a couple of years, and Senator Brandis wrote the legislation. He tells a story, it's great if you've ever seen that, about, you know, he called Google and said, I'd like to do a bill. And they said, yeah, freshman senator from Tampa, you know, go away. He says, okay, I'm going to do it by myself. And about a week later, Google's like, well, maybe we ought to help you and try to, you know. So, you know, Florida was the first to pass that, and that came out of Tampa Bay, and that's why, you know, you're looking at this as being an automated vehicle headquarters. So I think they're going to sneak up on us. All of a sudden, you're going to be they're going to be here, but it's going to be the early adopters in the next couple of years. You'll have one on the show floor. Several companies have said they'll have a show floor model in 2017, so in 2 years. Sweden with Volvo, we talked about having 100 vehicles on the road. So you will have some, and it will be the early adopters. It's not going to be for everybody. Mass adoption is not for years and years and years. But it will be here in the next decade, I believe, to where you'll have a significant number. And you're going to see You know, 55,800 was the high mark in the 80s of deaths on roads in America. It's gone down due to crumple zones, airbags, ABS, all those things. It's come down to under 40,000. It's still almost 40,000 people every year. Think about that from a political sense, right? All the things that we get excited about that are maybe a few hundred, a few thousand deaths, but this one, we're like, woo, whatever, you know? Harrison Ford crashes a plane, he's in the hospital with a broken arm, and it's all we can talk about in the news the last 24-hour cycle, right? He's okay, by the way, I was watching it this morning. But, you know, how many people are going to die on the roads today? You know, little hundreds, if not, you know, every day people die on the roads. And then the injuries, and then the personal injuries. So it's, embrace the self-driving car, it will save lives, it is going to be part of the solution, it is going to be part of our future. And what I'm challenging DOTs and is to work on P3s, right? Public-private partnerships, because DOTs aren't necessarily big data companies, and they're not video companies, and they, you know, these are things that are kind of new to them. So we want to come in and partner with them to develop these services, develop the data sets, to develop that exchange between the smarter city and the connected vehicle. A smarter car is just a subset of a connected vehicle. How many of you here have a vehicle that has some type of connection to a network? Show of hands, right? Right, they're already here, right? How are we communicating our infrastructure to those vehicles, you know? The only difference between their car and a smarter car is just which brain's controlling it, right? And that'll be phasing in over the next 10 years.
Great, thank you for that. Thank you. Joy, I'd like to ask you a question. I've been to a couple of conferences about entrepreneurship ecosystems, and I've only experienced two myself, Pittsburgh and Tampa. Right. But you've kind of been around the world to a lot of the hubs, not just in the U.S., but even beyond the U.S. How do they differ primarily from Tampa Bay in their development, and is there something missing here in Tampa? And if so, you know, what can we do to establish our community as a leader?
You didn't read the article? We are. No, I'm sorry. It's interesting. So I'd first start by saying if you are a tech hub, you don't actually have to tell people you are. They just know, right? I think outside the U.S. is a little bit different. I mean, like if you look at places like, say, Sydney or Shenzhen, China, or, you know, London, it's a lot different because it's culturally different. If you look at other maybe communities that are more like Tampa, right, from a size perspective, say, you know, not comparing ourselves against Silicon Valley, because Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley, and it's always going to be Silicon Valley. So it would be naive to assume that that's going to change. That doesn't mean you can't take the core things and core competencies that are in a community and build something that's unique. I think, and I was actually talking to Peter somewhere in the audience about Denver at lunch today. So I was in Denver. And I've been to Denver and Boulder and Colorado Springs, so now it's not Boulder anymore. And for anybody who thinks it is, it's actually Denver. And most of the companies that were in Boulder have moved to Denver. So they've kind of revamped their downtown, but what I think made a real difference there was they picked a couple of key areas to focus on, not 25 different ones. They were very selective in how economic development went out and recruited specific companies to come there and what type of incentives were provided. They've gone from University of Colorado campus being this place that was in the middle of nowhere to having completely run out of space and just been given another 100 acres, which they're going to develop. 122,000 people, not professors, not students, go to work there every day. They've created some really great public-private partnerships. And by that I mean there's been private equity firms and venture capitalists who've invested some money, but the vast majority of the money actually that kind of created that initially was public money. Now you see them doing things like, for instance, there's actually, I don't know if anybody knows what Galvanize is, but it's a very unique type of co-working mentorship program. It actually started in Colorado, and there's a huge one in downtown San Francisco now, but there's actually 2 locations in downtown Denver now. And then a new group that just started a new co-working space called Industry that opened last year. Unlike Tampa, the Uber office happens to be in that building, and they embrace Uber in Denver. They don't find the drivers. But one of the things that's very unique about it is it was an old farmer's market building, and the city actually leases it to the company that came in and started, which happened to be in the film industry, for $100 a year. In exchange for that, the company provided all the renovations and everything to the building. The building still is owned by the city. But they've created a space where there's literally a wait list for space to get into the space. And it's all sorts of tech, but there is an overlaying thing in Denver. While there's all sorts of things, there's a big data component to a lot of things that are happening there, and there's a healthcare component, but all types of healthcare. So a lot of it's in the technology field as relates to healthcare, but everybody from the state kind of on down has done that. And they've actually changed the venture capital landscape there as well by what they've done, where initially, actually 14 years ago, there was one venture capital firm in the state of Colorado. There's 17. So I would argue you absolutely can do that. You probably need to look at a model that's more realistic and figure out what the cores are, like we talked about cybersecurity earlier, right? We have a very big healthcare component here. Florida certainly has an opportunity to do things as it relates to both manufacturing and solar energy. So picking some things that are core, we have the Autonomous Vehicle Institute here. So there's some things that we've kind of set as benchmarks, but maybe we're not doing the best job of exploiting those.
That's great, thank you. I'm going to give you a follow-up if you don't mind, and let's talk about the money. And you know, and some things I've noticed is that typically there's either a shift in a city or a wealthy entrepreneur comes back in and funds things, okay? In Pittsburgh, they went through the decline of the steel industry, and they were forced to create, what are we going to do with this old money that we have here at Mellon, Carnegie Hellman, and invest in new technology. So they were forced to do that. And here, there hasn't been an economic disaster necessarily that has forced that, but we do have Mr. Vinnick coming in. However, he's focused more on not entrepreneurial or innovative ventures to some degree. However, we do have the county, Hillsborough County EDI2 is here today, that is trying to take a role in that, but the funding is always limited from government. Where do you see the funding problem, not that it's a problem, we do have some great organizations here, but the growth in funding for Tampa Bay in an early stage investment, where do you see that coming from in future years?
That's the point, right? So we have a lot of angels. Like most people tell me that they don't know that, but they just haven't looked. There's a lot of angels making lots and lots of investments, anywhere from $25,000 to I know of 3 that were made in the last 6 months that are in excess of $2 million from angels, right? So there is some money in that realm, and we have a lot of late stage capital, and we have plenty of private equity. What we lack, right, is that bridge round and that early Series A. Amen. That's the piece that's lacking. You're seeing some shifts, like Christian can probably talk about, like in Atlanta, there's been some shifts there. I was born and raised in Atlanta, so I moved down here from there. It's taken some time. There are some people, what I don't see here, what I would love to see change, we do have some entrepreneurs who've been very successful, who've made hundreds of millions of dollars in our community. For whatever reason, they've opted not to put things back into this community.
Right.
So the reality is, I would love to see that change. I think that would make a dynamic difference. If you took the wealthy, and I actually made this statement publicly about 2 weeks ago, and they gave 10% of what they give in philanthropic efforts, just 10. It would make such a huge difference in what would happen in this region over the next 2 to 3 years. It would be amazing.
Thank you. Sure.
I can add to that. Living that, Joy's right. It's that bridge stage, right? We're raising a Series A right now, so we're in that bridge funding, and it is painful. It's the most expensive money you'll ever raise is friends and family. All right, we've raised over $1 million of friends and family besides what we've put in as founders and owners, and it is the most expensive capital you ever raise, right? I don't ever want to tell my father-in-law he's part of his retirement screwed because so that's, or my mom. So but this is a huge issue. So innovation is key, right? We got a lot more smart people and smart ideas than we have an effective and efficient way to get capital in. Some of you might have seen this morning in USA Today, they had an interview with the CEO of Qualcomm, and they asked him about how much this cash that Qualcomm has and it's offshore, and his comment was, well, it's easier for us to buy a company offshore than it is right now onshore, right? So the reason their capital is not coming back in is because we've got, again, political structures. It's not the technology, it's not the capital. It's the political structures and the policies that are dissuading, rich investment, which we desperately need. To build on to what Joy said, there's a a few of these same type of individuals in Atlanta have done very well. And one of the comments somebody made once was, you know, they need to retire, right? They need to stop doing their next big business and putting all their money into it. And it's fantastic, right? They're creating jobs, and that's wonderful. But, you know, would it be better for the community if they'd created 10 companies? And then those would have created 10 companies. And all of a sudden you see a multiplying effect. And we do see a little bit of change. One of those guys, I've been talking to two of them recently. One of them basically said, Atlanta's been very good to me. He had 2 humongous exits over the billion dollar mark. And he said, I've never taken outside money. I've never made an angel investment. I don't know anything about it. So I'm giving my money to Excel Partners, and they're going to handle it for me. And I said, so you don't care? No, they'll invest in Silicon Valley. It's not going to go to Atlanta. Even though that was the place that he had 2 huge exits from, that money's not coming back where, in my humble opinion, now it's his to do with as he pleases 100%, but I'd love to see, as Joy said, that mentality of, let me grow 10 companies now. There's another one who's now starting to do that, who has had his latest exit. He's starting to do that in the area. So we need to find an easier way to get wealth converted into angel investments in early stage. Take the risk profile, understand the risk profile, understand how to go through due diligence and to do these things, to do this matching. It's just way too difficult. You mentioned before, you know, people will do $25,000 investment, and it'll take them, you know, 3 months, and they've got to see your balance sheet, and they've got to go through all this stuff. And that's just, it's not efficient. It's not a good way to disperse capital.
Right. Shark Tank has turned us all into venture capitalists, unfortunately.
And
They all want
ruined-
term sheets now
And
instead of
ruined
writing
a
check.
ton of, absolutely.
And can we get a commitment? Anybody makes $100 million in this room will come back and invest in other companies? Is that okay?
But I think, you know, one thing just kind of following on, it is changing a little bit. So for people who saw, how many people know we have a company in Florida that's received almost $600 million in funding? Oh, one person, awesome. So there is a company, they're outside of Miami, called Magic Leap. They've actually received almost $600 million in funding. There are other places where venture capital is being invested, but the good news about that, while it's not in Tampa, Florida in general has this problem. It's not a Tampa problem. It's a Florida problem. It raises visibility with people like, for instance, 100 million of that was from Kleiner Perkins. So I was talking to Mark Abbott about that, and I said, I was kind of joking, right? And I said, so why on earth did you put $100 million in a Florida-based company, right? Because they don't do that. And I'll spare you the expletives that went along with this, but basically his thing was, what they've created is so freaking amazing that we couldn't say no. So the good news is Mark's going to be on an airplane once every quarter going to Florida. So there's an opportunity for him to see other things now.
And those of you who don't know Kleiner Perkins, it's a large Sand Hill, Silicon Valley venture capital firm, very, very influential.
They're in the paper today too, but not for good things. One other thing to recognize is that to make a $250,000 investment, Kleiner, they're not going to do that, right? The overhead's not there. To make $1 million investment, they're probably not going to do that either. $100 million investment, hey, that's a lot of way to deploy capital. So the problem that Joy pointed out at that stage, right? So if you go to your friends and families, you go to maybe some of the angels in your community, you get that first $1 million, and then the next funding's going to come at $100 million because it's the easier way to do it. I mean, so there's just an understanding of $10 million investment, right, is easier for the VC to do rather than 10 $1 million investments. So it's naturally pushing that amount up there. So and I think it's affected the evaluations as well, frankly. But right here in that, they call it the chasm of death, you know, is where it's funding and then you're lucky to get out alive.
Thank you. Let's switch gears to Dr. Goswami. You've recently been innovating in a different sector, that of clean air technology. Can you tell me about why that's needed and where, tell me a little bit about your efforts in that area.
Okay. This is a new innovation that we've come up with. Frankly, my background being solar energy, so that knowledge came from that area. But the problem came from home, and that is my son, who is asthmatic from birth, allergies, asthma. And so I looked around everywhere, wherever there were technologies, devices being sold that would clean indoor air. None of them work. We found that out because we bought all of them and we used them, none of them work. And I attended a conference, a national conference with advertised session on indoor air quality, and I sat through that, and I shook my head. I said, they don't even understand the problem. How will they find the solution? And on my way back, I figured a technology that I've been working with in solar could be applicable over there, and that is the photocatalytic oxidation technology, which as the air goes through it, it oxidizes and therefore destroys all microorganisms, all volatile organic chemicals that are in the air.
Including Ebola virus and some other things
all,
like that.
all the viruses, it does not discriminate between influenza and Ebola. It just kills all of them, whatever goes through it. And so that technology, sat for a while in the university, and then eventually my wife, who had sold her business in Gainesville, she had an environmental laboratory and was bored sitting here in Tampa, because we moved to Tampa, said, why not license it from the university? So she licensed it, and and now there are other people involved. They're commercializing that technology. And what it will do is, it doesn't use sun, by the way, it uses lamps. And these are the lamps that give the specific wavelength that you need that would otherwise come from the sun. And so it's in your air conditioning duct where it integrates with that system, and therefore as the air goes through, it comes out completely clean. None of the others, whether it's HEPA filter, whether it's electrostatic or ionizers, none of them work, but this one does. And so I foresee, I was interviewed one time on CNN for that technology when it was still in the laboratory, and I said, I foresee one day that all air conditioning buildings, all air conditioning spaces would have a technology like that. And it's especially important in Florida because we have a lot of mold and mildew that grows. You can't even get rid of it. And so this technology will take care of it.
When can I buy it?
Yeah.
Now the CEO of the company is sitting right here. I'll put you in touch with her. Yes, the first product, which is the duct integrated, it's ready for the market. The second product, which is the standalone portable, now that they're working on in the Silicon Valley. Okay? And so working with the design firm so that not only does what it's supposed to do, but also looks good, also something that people can operate very easily, internet connected, you can turn it on before you go home. When the filter needs changing, it sends you a message and you click on it and the company knows that you need to change the filter and so on. So one part is available.
That's awesome.
The other will be later on.
I might talk to your CEO in a couple minutes there.
Okay.
It'd be awesome if you guys put that in airplanes too, since I travel all the time.
We, in fact, an aviation company is visiting us, I think, on the 18th. And so we'll see what happens there.
The hospitals are a big one too. I have
Indeed.
there's another company in Atlanta that's working on that. Basically, anytime there's water in a hospital, it's just where all the germs are doing it. So it's all the air handling systems. He's got a solution that does that in, but it sounds almost complementary.
Yeah. Certainly, the medical market is big, and I think there's a local company that's building a surgical center, and so they're in touch. But before a building is built, it's much easier. After a building is already there, then you got to retrofit, and you need to find how you can do that.
So the USF hospital could have USF technology?
That's what I think in the IDRB where you are located, the interdisciplinary research building, they have decided to buy a few units there.
Yeah, so I'll be the pilot study, so hopefully my allergies will get better.
Is your son doing better now?
Indeed.
Yeah, good.
Indeed.
Let's turn now to, we had a great presentation this morning from Samantha. She's out there on 3D printing, what her company does. Girish, can you tell me what Jabil is doing in that space and from a larger company standpoint, and where you see 3D working in the larger manufacturing firms as opposed to in the retail market?
Yeah, so I would I would take a step back and kind of go a level up to 3D printing and kind of define the umbrella called as additive manufacturing. And then within additive manufacturing, you have flavors that are commonly denominated as 3D printing, there's printed electronics, their integration, and so on and so forth, right? So additive manufacturing to us is the method by which you create a product, you add a feature, you create a device, you create a component, or you create all the four of them by sequentially laying layers of one material over the other. Predominantly what is common is single material additive manufacturing, but we are getting into products where different functional things such as semiconductors, interconnects, sensing elements, oxygen barriers, optics, right? All these different materials are now being converted in their physical form as we see and we assemble into inks. And as these inks mature, you will be able to print these inks in a sequential fashion. And as you are building the product, as you are building the component, you are able to add functionality. And the addition of functionality into a traditionally dormant product which is made up of, say, a single plastic material, and then you are able to add a sensor to it, or you're able to add an antenna to it, or you're able to add an energy harvesting pattern to it, right? That is really what excites us, because it's now we are able to bring this additive manufacturing process into making a product functional. Jabil's been using 3D printing for more than 15 years for rapid prototyping. We have been using this technology for production of molds for a long time. So you could 3D print and insert for a mold and then create a very rapid prototype of the design that you have with the material that's actually going to be used in high volume manufacturing instead of the material that's used for 3D printing, right? So these are some of the ideas that interest us. The additive manufacturing process gives you immense design freedom. You're able to create forms and you're able to add functions into those forms simultaneously. So you may not have to do two distinct processes, although the initial road to success will be a hybrid approach, right? Where you'll print a certain portion, then you will add a functional piece, and then you will add another structural portion. So now you have this complex device that is manufactured in multiple steps by using the additive manufacturing process. Another flavor of additive manufacturing process is what we call as printed electronics, right? In this case, what you can do is you can take a traditional graphic arts t-shirt printer, use these inks once they are mature and commercialized, and create electronic structures on flexible substrates. So now you can add functionality into your clothes. So instead of having a hybrid device, you could print a sensor into your clothes. Or you can add functionality into your drug delivery patch. So it's the ability to add these functional features into dormantly or traditionally passive dormant products that are manufactured today either through traditional processes or through 3D printing, right, is really what motivates us to get into this space.
That's great. I belong to Tampa Hackerspace because I'm a geek at heart, and a lot of people are doing wearable tech, and that is just awesome. He'll let you see that if you want to come up afterwards.
So I mean, this is basically an example with functional features. So if you guys want it,
So yeah, we're going to do a little Q&A now. Thank you, the panelists, for your discussions. Very, very interesting. If we have any questions, I'll open up. You can ask the panelists directly. Do we have any? Yes.
Yeah.
I'll repeat the question so they can hear. So you're asking about the use of the technology in China where there's very polluted environments for people. Is that...
Yes, very good question. China actually will be our biggest market because of the sheer number of people and the air quality problems that they have. And what I found out, I was in China in September, and the company that Lenovo was its offshoot, and so they wanted to meet with me, and they wanted just the hospital and schools market for China for this product. And the reason is that couples there can have only one child. And so they want to provide everything they can for their child. Now, outside air quality they cannot do anything about, but at least inside the buildings, they want to be able to provide something that will clean that air. So I foresee China as the biggest market. The only thing is, for our small company, we really don't know how to handle it yet. Who are the right partners over there, who are the wrong partners, who to get investment from and who to say no and stuff like that. So we're looking for a lot of advice from people, and I'm looking at you now. See, hopefully you and other people will advise us on that. Yeah.
Next question? Any closing comments from the panel? We have 1 or 2 more minutes. Anybody like to mention anything we didn't touch on? Christian?
Well, I mean, Tampa, you guys are going in the right direction. I moved to Tampa from Portugal with my wife in 1994, and it was an up-and-coming city, and it continues to be up-and-coming. But what I'm seeing now is just fantastic. The leadership that you're starting to get politically is great. All these ideas, I mean, all this stuff is good. This is actually wonderful. Getting that that funding issue figured out really is going to just be like, you know, adding fuel to a fire. I always talk about from the Atlanta market is, you know, you can put new tires on a car and you can put a new engine in and leather seats, do all that stuff, but you don't have fuel for the tank. It's just a real waste of time. And fuel to our market, to startups, is cash. Sorry, it's crass, but that's it, right? So, you know, figuring out a way to take the wealth that's here, taking big companies that want to bring in, you know, doing a pre-deal for $10 million to license that market and using that instead of equity, you know, are some great strategies. But, you know, you're doing the right things here, and I look forward to being a part of that as we're looking to grow here, have some projects here, and are looking to put an office here as well. So thanks for having us.
That's very exciting. Thank you. Joy, any final thoughts? Yeah.
I would just challenge people to get involved. I think that there's so many people who have no idea about the great things that are actually going on in the community from the technology standpoint, and to, you know, go out to some meetups, you know, go to some different events, and just kind of find out what's going on and pick whatever's important to you, whatever thing you think is really cool or geeky or you love it, and get involved in that.
Great, thank you. Any other thoughts, Girish?
Yeah, I think I love the interactive nature of the audience, of the speakers, and of the panel here, right? Usually we get sucked into very specific manufacturing events, but to hear ideas from advertisement folks, to hear ideas from folks that are looking at the legal aspects, the funding aspects, right? I think it's a good start, and we hope the momentum continues in the next few years for the festival.
Great. Thank you. And I'd like to thank all of our panelists today. Please give them a round of applause.